Hi everyone and welcome back to a new video. Today we are going to be looking at the next part of the book, Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. We looked at this, the first part of this book in quite a bit of detail in this video, and we looked at his premises for what love and respect mean, why men need respect and women need love, and blah, 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 blah. I would recommend you watch that before you watch this if you want to, but otherwise today we're going to be diving into the sections in which Emerson talks about how men can and should show love to their wives and how women can and should show unconditional respect to their husbands. For this, he uses the acronyms couple for men and chairs for women, which, I'm sorry, the chairs acronym just always makes me laugh. Couple apparently stands for closeness, openness, understanding, peacemaking, loyalty, and esteem, where chairs is conquest, hierarchy, authority, insight, relationship, and sexuality. Let's just jump straight into this book and take a look at what these mean. So, men, show your love to your wives through C. Closeness. She wants to be close. This one seems pretty fine actually. It's about making time for each other, spending time together, talking, connecting. All pretty good things. It's, you know, these kernels of truth before he spreads all the rot, isn't it? Even if this bit is steeped in some traditional gender roles, it's not too bad. That said, there are a few little segments I have issues with, like, yet another idea is to sit and talk with her as she gets the meal together. Tell her about your day and be sure to ask about hers. She may be busy with children or other duties, but she'll be listening, I assure you. What she tends to look for is your desire to dwell with her for short periods to discover where her heart is. If she senses you authentically want to connect, this can do more for her than a 1-hour discussion. For your wife, face-to-face time is heart-to-heart time. And yeah, I agree, this is great, spend time with your wife. Although I don't get why this is apparently so revolutionary and this is gonna save your relationship. Again, I have to ask, isn't this just what people want to do anyway? Why be in a couple, why be married if you don't want to come home and spend time with each other and talk to each other about your day? If you don't enjoy spending time with someone, doing the little things together, chatting with them, why are you marrying them? This is followed up by some of the most ridiculous lines. For example, some husbands think that spending all the time in the kitchen is unmanly, but as we've seen in Deuteronomy, the Hebrew generals did not mock a warrior for being home. I also love this, well, by love I mean hate, this idea that apparently the only way to spend time with a woman is by being in the kitchen because that's where she belongs. God's sake. Like I say, he has these kernels of good ideas and then he ruins it with rubbish like, I'm not asking men to become women who sit at tiny tables at cappuccino shops and sip coffee as they share life face to face. You are a man. Your wife loves you for being a man, not a woman. She doesn't expect you to become feminine. I hate stuff like this so much. He then throws out groundbreaking lines like, consider being affectionate without wanting sex. This might sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but it's true. What? You can be affectionate without wanting to get your pee-pee sucked? What is this madness? I'm just a silly man. I don't understand this at all. It's ridiculous, but actually no. Apparently being affectionate without wanting sex is actually the way you get more sex. Yeah. He says that by touching her little bits throughout the day, but not actually initiating sex at those times, you can get her to be more responsive when you do initiate sex at the end of the day. So women apparently want affection but not sex, but you can use that need for affection to get sex yourself as a man. Got it. It's very odd. I think the concept of women wanting and enjoying and initiating sex themselves never passes into Emerson's mind. He's just like, what a woman wants? And no, real women don't want that. Don't be silly. No. Next up on our list of what women want, we have openness. She wants you to open up to her, which again doesn't sound too awful until you realize most of this chapter revolves around your wife wants you to talk to her, open up to her. Don't let her feel lonely. Tell her your feelings. Otherwise you'll have no chance of getting her to have sex with you, you shitty man. Seriously, it feels like every one of these points about the things you need to do to make your wife feel loved are just ways of like saying, if you don't do this, she won't have sex with you. And you want sex, right, man? It's just very, very bizarre. He then goes on to claim that apparently wives see husbands as mysterious islands because everyone knows that people of different genders don't know how to have a conversation with each other before they just jump into a wedding, right? Apparently men are open during courting because it's fun, but once they're married they stop communicating because Once he concluded that she was his dream come true, contentment set in. He no longer felt the need to share and be open. Now that he's married, he doesn't stand her need for him to be open, to simply talk to her, share with her. Who are these people and why are your lives so miserable? And why are you marrying someone and living with someone that you don't want to talk to? I've said this before, and I think it was in a Girl Defined video, but why do so many Christian people seem to see a wedding as the end goal? Like, after you get married, after you are married, after you've had the wedding, everything just stops and stagnates afterwards in their mind. It's bizarre to me. It's almost like they want to get married but not have a marriage. They want the wedding but not to build a life with a specific person afterwards. It's so weird. Like, every happy couple that I've spoken to have been married have said that, like, marriage isn't really that different from their relationship beforehand. Like, yeah, they had a wedding, but then they were still living together, they were still a team, a partnership, still supporting each other, still, you know, the same kind of couple, just now you're married too, because they'd already built that foundation. The wedding didn't change much. I think that's why people like me don't really care so much about marriage itself, because I want to build a relationship with someone and build a life with someone, but I don't need a piece of paper to change anything or define that or anything like that, you know? Living with someone, being a team is enough. But this idea that, like, the wedding is the end of it, and then you all change, you just go back to, what was the word you used, like complacency or something like that? It just sounds miserable, doesn't it? Like, why just, like, do everything to get to the wedding and then not want to be with someone and spend time with them and enjoy them and all that stuff? I don't get it. It sounds miserable. He says, as one wife wrote to me, he's completely disengaged. It's really difficult being around him. He never talks. I have no idea what would touch his heart, and I would really like to know. Miserable sounding. I feel so sorry for these people. So apparently, men, you should make your wife feel loved by talking to her like she's an actual human that you enjoy spending time with. Groundbreaking, I know. Emerson does offer a serious warning to men, though. Don't become bitter and suspicious because your wife wants you to speak with her. Seriously, this is genuine advice from an adult man to other adult men. What is wrong with these people? Who marries someone that they don't enjoy talking to and being with? I know I keep saying it, but who are these people and why are they doing this? Stop it. And then the next point is not just about speaking to your wife, but apparently, shock horror, you actually have to listen to her as well. It's almost like a conversation is a two-way street. What? Madness. And point 4 is, again, shocking. When you two have conflict, apparently, both of you should apologize and try and find a resolution and have a conversation about it. My mind is blown here. Crazy, wild, definitely not what we teach absolutely every child in nursery at all. But apparently it's hard for men to say they're sorry because when a man says I'm sorry, he fears that he will lose respect. Sorry, what? Being a mature, kind, compassionate person taking responsibility for their actions is not something that is going to make people lose respect for you. So there your U and P, your understanding and peacemaking. And the next point, which apparently men really struggle to do, but that will make a woman feel loved, is display loyalty? Yeah. I mean, actually, this does seem difficult based on all the cheating stories in this book so far, but there we go. Some examples of this are, and these are things that are so difficult for a man to do, apparently, so difficult that he has to be taught. Help her make decisions, such as ones regarding the children. Don't look lustfully at other women. Keep commitments. Wild, crazy. I know this is really hard for most men to do. This is so difficult. And it's shocking that women want these things. Like a man who doesn't cheat and she can trust. It's asking a lot. We are very, very demanding in this way, but here you go. Seriously, this is meant to be like stuff that's like, hey, you know, you're having all these problems. These are the things you can do to fix your marriage. These are things that are tough. And they're spend time together, speak to your wife, listen to your wife, apologize when you do something wrong, and be loyal. These are things that men struggle with, apparently. This blows my mind. Aren't these just the things that are like any basic foundation for any relationship? Surely. And then his last point, the E, is just very simply, be nice to her. Make her feel good. You give her encouragement and praise with kindness and enthusiasm. You value her opinion in the grey areas as not wrong, but just different. You make her feel first in importance. you're proud of her and all she does. Again, these are just the basics of being a decent human being and having any kind of relationship with someone. They're not, this is how you display unconditional love. These are the things you have to do. These are just the basics. This is insane to me. Anyway, with this in mind, we're going to move on to Emerson's chairs. These are the ways a woman should show respect to her husband, apparently. So let's see if these are equally as groundbreaking. Immediately, what sets off a ton of red flags to me is that Emerson opens with this success story. Apparently, Emerson gets a woman to spontaneously tell her husband, I was thinking about you today, and several things about you that I respect, and I just want you to know that I respect you. Which is nice, right? Cool. And his response is, wow, hey, can I take the family out to dinner? So then the woman goes back to Emerson and says, a few days later, this wife wrote to us again and said, you won't believe it. He's in the laundry room. Do you have any other respect tests? I think I might get a cruise out of this. So while basically every point in the section for men concluded with, and if you do this, she's more likely to have sex with you, it seems like so many of the things in this section are women, do this, and he's more likely to buy you things. I hate it, it's shallow, it's gross, it annoys me. Is it really that controversial to suggest that sex should be a mutual thing for both to enjoy, not just something the man manipulates his way into? And things like going for dinners and holidays and date nights, again, shouldn't they be a mutual thing that you enjoy together and you want to do because you enjoy spending time together, not something the woman has to manipulate into getting? Very bizarre, very transactional, don't like any of it. Emerson really does reduce relationships down to transactions. You do this, you get this. She does this, she gets this. And it's really, really gross to me. So with his rules for men in mind, let's take a look at what women should apparently be doing unconditionally. Remember, he thinks women don't crave or deserve respect in the same way men do. So these are all alien to women apparently. They don't get this stuff. Number 1 is conquest. Appreciate his desire to work and achieve. He says, by conquest, I mean the natural, inborn desire of the man to go out and conquer the challenges of his world, to work and achieve. As a wife, if you can start to understand how important your husband's work is to him, you will take a giant step towards communicating respect and honour. He then goes on to compare a woman's feelings about having a miscarriage to a man's feelings about losing a job, which feels incredibly disrespectful to everyone involved. Does he not realise that so many women love working and being challenged and achieving things, and if a woman lost a job, she would be as devastated as a man in many cases. And when a couple loses a pregnancy, that affects both parents. It really does. But no, apparently it's a female thing to care about babies and it's a male thing to work and all that stuff. But no, enjoying things like work and being challenged and achieving things, that's not a male thing, that's a human thing. He claims, the first question a man usually asks another man when they meet for the first time is, what do you do? Right or wrong, most men identify themselves by their work. Okay, but as a woman, I also do that and get asked that and ask that of other people. I also identify myself based on my work, my job, my career, my creativity. It's so weird because throughout this book, Emerson goes on about how it's totally normal for a man to want this stuff, to need this stuff, to create his identity around his stuff and his work and his life. But the minute a woman does it, she's not a real woman. We're denying our nature. Women need to define ourselves based on if we have babies or not. I don't like it. But apparently Emerson says that us women can never understand this because many women have no idea of the importance men put on their work. Are you actually serious? But actually, no, hang on, wait, no, he does understand that some women want to work, just not real women, right? So he says, when I speak of a man's deep-seated desire to work, I'm not saying women have no desire to work. Women have always worked, but generally they did so in the home, with children nearby. In recent decades, women have discovered they're quite capable of going out into the workday world and holding significant positions and making tremendous achievements. But when a wife goes out to work, the question remains, who will remain home to care for the children? The answer's daycare, a solution that at best is hardly ideal and at worst is severely harmful to the children. So basically, hey, women, you can work, but you shouldn't. Does he not realise that if a woman wants to work, men can also stay home with the kids, right? If they need someone there. If you don't like childcare, nursery, whatever, why don't you stay home and look after them? If you realise this idea to want to conquest and achieve is innate to men, then realise it's innate to some women as well. And of course, all of this completely ignores those of us like myself who don't want to have kids at all. Isn't it right, baby? You're my kid. Kid. Love you. In perhaps one of the most tone-deaf and privileged passages in the entire book, he says, and this annoys me, and it'll annoy you guys too, I know it will. It's interesting that in the Western world at least, women see careers as a freedom of choice issue. Women don't want to be told they have to work. They want the freedom to choose full-time mothering and or a career. This guy's never been working class, has he? Not once in his life. He has never lived in poverty. Seriously, is he really going to suggest that 9-year-old ancestor of mine who died working in a mine? Yeah, she was absolutely choosing to be there for a bit of fun because she was a feminist. What about my mum growing up working on a farm? Totally a choice for her. Or when I worked 2 minimum wage jobs at 16 whilst in full-time education. Yeah, totally because I'm a feminist and not because I needed to feed myself and get myself to uni. Totally did it for a giggle. And when my dad was made redundant from his factory job when I was a kid, and my mum had to support the entire family on less than £10,000 a year, including 3 kids and grandparents living with us, and while she was working part-time on minimum wage at a supermarket, like I say, less than £10,000 a year, she fed and looked after us all. Yeah, that was totally like a feminist protest on her part, right? And not something she had to do, otherwise we'd all be homeless and starving. How does he think women like me get by if we don't work? I don't have a husband, I don't have a family with money, I've been supporting myself and working since I was 14 out of necessity, not choice. I'm incredibly lucky that I'm at a stage in my life where I get to choose things like the hours where I work, still a hell of a lot, and where I work from and stuff like that, but whether I have to work at all is not a choice. It's just not. And the sooner douchebags like this understand this, the better. That said, if I did have a choice, sitting around all day and relying on someone else's money sounds like my worst nightmare. I don't think Emerson has really met all that many actual real women in the world, and it seems like the ones he has met are all upper and middle class white women who, you know, can be stay-at-home mums if they want and all this stuff. He says, "My counselling experience leads me to conclude that the typical woman is looking for a husband who is capable enough to enable her to leave the workforce if she so desires. As she evaluates her future with a man, she instinctively considers his ability to take care of her and the children. The good-willed woman marries for love, not money. Nonetheless, she is very aware of the need to make a nest." No, stop it, leave, shh. This could not be less accurate for so many women, especially ones like myself. I don't want anyone taking care of me. I don't want to be with anyone who won't fully support my career. I don't want to be with anyone who would encourage me to stay home. I don't care how much my partner earns. For me, it's more important that, so one of the things I love about my partner is that now I'm doing more poetry performances around Leeds and stuff like that. He comes with me all the time and he cheers me on and he films my performances and he's always there with me and he reads through my drafts of poems and he's wonderful and he's supporting me and my dreams. That's what I need. I don't care how much money he makes. I need someone who's there and who believes in me, not someone who can pay an electricity bill. I can do that myself. And despite what misogynists keep telling me online, I'm not the exception. I'm not at all. I just don't think they've genuinely bothered to interact with that many women. Then going back to Emerson's whole all women are insecure thing that we saw in the first part of this video series, he says, "There's also the question of how much a wife who is the main breadwinner enjoys her role. Remember the basic question that all wives have. Does he love me as much as I love him? Women are basically insecure about this, and if a wife is out there doing the providing, bringing home the money while he stays home, her insecurity goes up, not down. She wonders, would he even be here if it weren't for the money I make? Becoming the main provider for the family can result in the woman being attacked at her level of deepest fear." This is absolutely laughable, and I'm at a loss for words. So on the one hand, he's saying, you know what, you should actually marry a man who has a lot of money and can provide for you, and that should be up there on your priorities. But if a man marries you for your money and to provide for him, that should make you insecure. The double standards are insane. I hate all of this. Every time I think this book can't get worse, it does. A father with an infant does not compare to a mother with an infant. I do not believe that any social engineering will make daddy a natural mother. Typically, the woman leads towards having the baby and caring for the baby, and the man leans towards working in the field for her and the baby. So, with all these ridiculous, outdated stereotypes in mind, how does Emerson think a silly little woman should be showing him respect? Well, we should be saying to men, honey, thank you for getting out there and working. If you want to elaborate, tell him that you're grateful that he's giving you the opportunity to choose to go out and work or be home with the children, and you just want to thank him for that. Oh my god, yes, of course. Thank you for allowing me to make my own money. Thank you for allowing me to be an adult. Thank you for allowing me to make my own choices. It's so good that you men are allowing me to have the illusion of freedom instead of actual freedom. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mwah. Love you. So to summarise the first 2 points from the men and women's side here, husbands, you have the gruelling task of spending time with your wife, and in return, wives, you have to unconditionally support a man's career and take it seriously, but no, he'll never do the same for you. If you're lucky, he might let you get a little job as a hobby, but honestly, he's the one out there making a difference in the world. He's the one doing the real work, and you need to thank him for that constantly. The next point is very, very similar. It's hierarchy, it's appreciate his desire to protect and provide. This chapter is full of the usual biblical submission nonsense that we've spoken about in a hell of a lot of videos before. The whole, women submit, men love, blah, blah, blah. The good-willed husband sees it as his duty to protect his wife. At the same time, the wife is called upon to place herself under that protection. This is the biblical definition of hierarchy. It is not male superiority for the sake of putting down the female. It is the male's responsibility to place himself over the female and protect her. He then goes on to say, and again, I hate this so much, will the concept of biblical hierarchy lead to abuse? Will a man take advantage of being the head of the family by putting down and even abusing his wife and children? Yes, this is possible. But because it is possible does not mean a woman should refuse to allow her husband to be the head. If a husband is evil-willed, the abuse will happen anyway, no matter what the family structure is. I hate this so much. This is exactly like what we were talking about uncovering in the first part, where he's like, well, you might be abused, but a good man wouldn't do that, would he? If he's going to abuse you, he's going to do it anyway, regardless of what I say, so might as well make it easier for him, you know? Might as well tell all women to be submissive, so none of them can recognise abuse. I feel strong enough to leave, and meh. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen, regardless of what I say. Not my fault, and I hate it. I hate it so much. This goes back to what those Christian bloggers were saying in the beginning of the last video, right? And I quote, perhaps enabling abusive men to use the book to control their wives was not the intention of this book, but that can't erase the fact that hundreds of abusive men are using the book as an excuse to control their wives. This blogger in particular then goes on to share the stories of real women who have suffered because of what's taught in this book, and she's compiled a whole document on this. There are literally hundreds of comments in here of people who were hurt and damaged by this book. So to pick a very, very select few, here's some examples. I can attest firsthand that following this ideology with my abusive husband almost left me dead by his hand. When we first dated and married, I would stand up to him when he was in one of his rages, and when our marriage was fractured, I turned to biblical advice to learn how to fix what was obviously my issue if he was constantly so unhappy. When I lost my fight, so to speak, he turned even more dangerous, trying to provoke me into a fight. I left the day he genuinely tried to choke me to death, and I refused to stand up to him. I now know I did everything I could to save our marriage, but following this bad advice to be even more submissive almost cost me my life. Another woman says, I stayed in a very emotionally abusive relationship because I was taught so wrongly. He would always throw respect in my face. Anytime I didn't agree with him, I was being disrespectful. I read books telling me to pray for him and be respectful. Meanwhile, I was dying inside, constantly criticized. Love was used as a tool to punish or reward me. This book belittles women and can break their spirits, especially in abusive situations. This is how I felt when I was given this book to read during my abusive marriage. It simply reaffirmed what my abuser was preaching from sunup to sundown. I was the problem and the one walking in sin. And as someone who has suffered narcissistic abuse myself, this was one of the things that really hit me with this, because this is what Johnny would tell me too. I was the problem. It was my fault. My fault that he was cheating. My fault that I caught it. My fault that I wasn't cool enough with it. My fault that I wasn't trusting him enough, wasn't open enough. I was too crazy. I was on the wrong medication. I was too emotional and so on. These were all my problems, even when he was the one doing things wrong. He would throw his phone at my head and then blame me that it broke because I made him do it. And for the longest time, I really did genuinely think it was my fault. And that's one of the reasons I stayed so long. Because he kept telling me things will get better if you change, if you're better, if you're cool, if you're nicer, if you change your medication. And I did. I tried all kinds of different changes to my medication, my dosage. I even stopped taking it at one point, which threw me into like this horrific withdrawal. And it was a nightmare. And every time I made the change he'd ask for, he'd always ask for more and walk all over me more and hurt me more, lie more, drink more, cheat more, shout more, break more of my things, make me feel worse about myself. It never ended. Every time I gave him an inch, he asked for another mile, you know? He was telling me the exact things about myself that this book is saying to the women reading it. And it's not just the women suffering because of this book too. There are stories in there from men as well. For example, I'm sorry to say that I read this book and followed the advice given for men, wholeheartedly throwing myself into showing my wife unconditional love with the hopes of restoring our marriage. Unfortunately for me, this meant turning a blind eye to increasingly destructive behaviour, immorality and even abuse, all with the idea that if I just showed her more love, she would suddenly wake up and realise she really wanted me. It's absolutely heartbreaking. This isn't just me being like a little bit picky. These are real people who have been hurt by this book and who continue to be hurt by it. And as I've kept saying in like quite a few videos recently, the reason this book is so dangerous is because it's based on kernels of truth. There are good things in there. So people are like, you know what? Yeah, respect is good. Love is good. Therefore, everything else he's saying must be good and right too. And that's so dangerous. To go back to the book, the next point is, again, basically the same as the first two. Authority. Appreciate his desire to serve and lead. A lot of repetition here, a lot of page filler. I feel like Emerson just had a word count to reach. 3 chapters to just say, look, you can try and be equal, but a man's always going to be in charge of you, and you make sure he knows it, bitch. This chapter starts off with a lot of like, la la la, women want to make decisions? Really? Ha ha ha. And how mutual submission among couples is nonsense, according to him, because according to the Bible, if a decision must be made, the wife is called upon to defer to her husband. And then he says, like, if you're in conflict, as a woman, you just need to be quiet. It's not really sexist, it's just in the Bible. And Emerson literally ends the chapter by writing, this is the key to empowerment. You get what you want by giving him what he wants, which literally again goes back to this idea of transactional relationships, which I hate. Kara's snoring over by the door, sorry if you can hear her. The letter I in chairs is insight. Appreciate his desire to analyse and counsel. This chapter is about how mostly women are arrogant and don't give their men a chance. Literally, they're words he uses. And about how women aren't as smart as we think we are. Because he wrote a whole section titled, it was Eve, not Adam, who was deceived, and blah blah blah. Women always lead men astray, and we shouldn't be trusted with decisions, and all of that. Emerson wants women to ask themselves, 1. Could you be thinking too highly of your natural discernment and intuition? And 2. Is it possible that you might be deceived on certain fronts, and that you could use your husband's insight because you don't see what he sees? It is so patronising, and I hate it. But, you know, we can't possibly have women trusting our own instincts and intelligence, can we? It's just not right, not natural. He goes on to say this, and this is annoying as hell, and women who are watching, I know you're going to be as annoyed about this as I am. Women do not see themselves as sinning, even though they readily admit bad habits and wrong attitudes. They write these off to chemical imbalance, hormonal problems, or dysfunction due to family of origin. He then offers one of the most offensive examples. For example, on occasion, a husband may venture into that dangerous territory known as, honey, you're putting on a few pounds. In truth, it is far more than a few pounds. His wife has let herself go, and he feels it's time to be honest. What he usually gets in return is, you should love me no matter how I look. Or he may be told he knows nothing about her eating disorder and that he should be checking his own potbelly. If the husband is on the trim side, as many men with very overweight wives are, she will bring up some other log that he needs to get out of his own eye. That time she caught him viewing internet pornography or overindulging in alcohol. The point is, it's easy for a wife to discount or disparage her husband's suggestion that she has some problem that needs correcting. I have no words for how much is wrong with all of that. Please let me know what you think down in the comments, because I have feelings. This entire section is basically just like, babes, just admit you're wrong and you're not as smart as you think you are, right? He's the man, he's the clever one, yeah, love? And I hate it. I hate it so much. The R in chairs is for relationship. Appreciate his desire for shoulder-to-shoulder friendship. In this chapter, Emerson tells women to sit still and look pretty. Men want you around but not to talk, so shut up. There's a bunch of stuff then about how men want to sit and watch TV with you while you're quiet, but women always have chores they need to be doing, so it just doesn't work. Women! He's all like, you just need to sit still, be with him, but then do all the chores when he's not around, he's not interested in you, be there when he wants you, but make sure everything else is still done. It's just that you have to do it all, you know? Your life should revolve around his schedule, or something ridiculous. Honestly though, like, again, there's this nice little grain of truth in here that makes sense, that is lovely. Like, I personally love just sitting with a friend or my partner or my dog, and each of us independently doing our own thing, you know, each of us reading, drawing, painting, whatever. And that's the little grain of truth that is nice. Sometimes just spending time together doing the little things is lovely, but that's not what the chapter is suggesting. According to all the examples Emerson gives, he wants women to just sit by and watch as the men do something, and the women just sit there and watch them and be quiet, while the men have no concerns for how their wives feel about it. There's things like men doing woodwork while the wife just sits in the cold little room next to him not doing anything and just... There's a story about a man going hunting and the wife has to carry his stuff for him but not say or do anything while they're there, and the men are like, oh babes, this is the best day we've ever spent together. He says that wives need to show their husbands that they're their friends by sitting silently next to him and not doing anything. And the last chapter / last checkpoint in chairs is sexuality. Appreciate his desire for sexual intimacy, because we all know that men are the only ones who want sex and women never do. We have to be coerced into it every time. There is literally nothing in this book that indicates that Emerson understands that women want and enjoy sex too. All the sex stuff is very focused to men, this is what you want. Men, this is how you get it. And sorry, Kara's having a drink. You done, baby? Well done, gorgeous. He even opens this chapter by being like, women only want emotional connections, and they only give out sex in response to that because they have to. With stories like this one. She would not respond to him sexually until he met her emotional needs. She wanted emotional release. She wanted him to talk to her face to face, and until he met her emotional needs, she wouldn't respond to him sexually. After all, that's what love was all about, wasn't it? So Emerson gives this woman some advice, and apparently, she decided to minister to her husband sexually. Not because she particularly wanted to, but because she wanted to do as unto Jesus Christ. She didn't have that need for sex. It wasn't within her. But she realized that this was her husband's need, and the Lord had spoken to her about meeting his need first. So she said, all right, Lord, I will serve him, and I will meet that need gladly. And she proceeded to do so. So what happened? Did her need for emotional release and talking face to face ever get met? She reported back to me, when we lay there in bed afterwards, I couldn't get him to shut up. So you have a woman with no desire for sex who is coerced into having sex she doesn't want to have, just so he'll talk to her. Sounds a lot like rape, or at least bordering on it, and I feel so sorry for this woman. That is not okay. Then he goes on with more of these harmful stereotypes like, often the answer to the problem lay in the fact that she wanted intimacy and affection without all the sexual touching, while he wanted sex and was not being too patient with moments of affection only. Sex for him and affection for you is a two-way street. I pity this man so much if he thinks women don't want sex and men don't want affection and intimacy. Like, ridiculous. He then says that during counselling, a wife told me that she thought sex was a man's number one need. I respected that sex is symbolic of his deeper need, respect. So you respect your husband by having sex with him even when you don't want to. And husbands, love your wives by talking to her even when you don't want to. I just can't. This book. Emerson actually has the audacity to write, when a wife refuses, that symbolises to him that she does not care about him and does not respect him and his need. A wife also needs to think about how unfair it is to say to her husband, have eyes only for me, and continually turn him down when he approaches her sexually. As a wife, you spell respect to your husband when you appreciate his sexual desire for you. No, 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 no. Screw this. I don't care who you are. Woman, man, non-binary person. Any of you can say no anytime you want, for any reason you want. You don't owe anyone anything sexual. It's not respectful to have sex with someone when you don't want to. That's them disrespecting you, and that's not okay. This idea that, well, you have to have sex or he'll look elsewhere, and if you don't want him to look elsewhere, you have to have sex with him, is disgusting and dangerous and horrible, and I hate it. I hate it all so much. He then suggests that a man is visually oriented when it comes to sexual desire. He sees a beautiful woman, her face, her figure, and he's stimulated. Women are not visually oriented when it comes to sex, at least not to the degree men are. And again, I have to ask, has he ever met a woman? I know I myself, I'm like, my partner lifts a little t-shirt, I'm like, hello. And I think he's absolutely beautiful and stunning. In another section, he literally claims women don't lust for men's bodies. Is he crazy? Maybe a woman has never lusted for his body, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Plenty of us do. He says, think about when you get out of the shower versus when he gets out of the shower. When you step out of the shower, he's all eyes, oblivious to everything else. But what happens when he steps out of the shower? You probably say something like, please stand on the bath mat, or be careful, I just waxed the floor. You're not visually oriented. That might happen to you, mate, but we're not all the same. I think he has to realise that attraction, again, isn't a gendered thing, it's an individual thing. Different people experience different levels of attraction to different stimuli. It's all normal, it's a spectrum. It happens differently for all different kinds of people, and it's okay. Then there's a horrific story in which a daughter confides in her mother that her and her husband haven't been intimate in a week, and the mother responds disgustingly with, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Why would you deprive him of something that takes such a short amount of time and makes him so happy?" Again, there is absolutely no shame in anyone wanting to delay or put off or just say no to being sexual with someone for any length of time. It's alright. It's not something you should feel guilty about. It's not something you should ever be forced into. And the idea that sex is something that just takes a short amount of time and makes him happy is so sad to me. It should be a shared experience. It should be for both of you. I'm sad for this mother. I'm sad for this daughter. I'm sad for Emerson, who's writing this. And I'm sad for his wife. I really am. But apparently a woman not spreading her legs is exactly the same as a man giving his wife the silent treatment. No, but okay. Then there's an awful story about a husband who has an affair and the wife blames herself because she'd become so busy with life, kids, etc. that I'd forsaken my husband in this area and left him vulnerable to attack from the enemy. And then Emerson calls the woman he cheated with an adulteress and sinner and blah blah blah, and all the blame is placed on the women. The wife because she wasn't paying him enough attention and having enough sex with him, and the woman he cheated on because she's the temptress, the adulteress, she's a bitch. It's not the man's fault. He couldn't help it. He's just a weak man who was tempted, right? No, I hate it. Take some responsibility. Then in like the 40th story in this book about cheating, Emerson tells another story of a different man who cheated and also blames his wife. The husband has the cheek to say, "I don't blame her for my immorality, but she doesn't own up to anything. I'm not blaming her, but she's not blameless. She never said she contributed to the problem. I want to forget, but she won't let me forget it." I hate this so much. Yeah, if you have relationship problems, there's probably things on both sides that you can do and have to take responsibility for. But if you cheat, you made the choice to cheat. It's not on the other person for anything they did. You made that choice, you own it. Then there's this whole thing about like how even though in the first section it said that men should display loyalty to women, women have to realise that men are attracted to any woman and every woman. And it doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they want to sleep with someone else, and you should get over that. You need to be understanding of his struggles, apparently. It sounds very much like a man who's cheated making excuses, doesn't it? I would not be shocked if Emerson's cheated on his wife several times, and he's blaming her for it. And then finally on the list of things you must do unconditionally, we get you respond to him sexually more often and initiate sex periodically. You let him acknowledge his sexual temptations without fearing he'll be unfaithful and without shaming him. So, in conclusion, Emerson says if you want to have a good relationship, men need to spend time with their wives, talk to them, listen to them, apologise when you do something wrong, and compliment them, whereas women need to put his job and needs before yours, know your job is just a hobby unlike his, understand he ranks above you and should make decisions for you, understand you can have some input but he has the final say, serve him, like actually realise you're probably not as smart as you think you are and like you're kind of dumb because you're just a silly little woman, yeah? And finally give him sex whenever he wants, even when you don't want to and you're having to force yourself, otherwise he'll sleep with someone else because he's a man and you can't help it, and then you'll have to grovel for forgiveness and it'll all be your fault. And that's about it. Yeah, that's fair and equal, right? You'd never guess this book was written by a man, would you? And then the last few chapters are just a summary of the rest of the book and nothing really new or interesting to cover. But that is where we're going to end this today. Please let me know your thoughts on both of these videos that I put out. I know this was long. I know there's a lot to it. But I think it's important to talk about these things. We have to acknowledge that this book isn't all bad. It's not just like he's out here saying, men beat your wives and women take it and that sort of thing. There are good bits in here, and there is some truth to it, there's some good bits of advice, but that's what makes the dangerous bits all that more dangerous, and that's why we need to talk about these and discuss all of it. Ultimately though, what I will say is that if you are in an abusive relationship, no matter who you are, please know there is a way out. Please know it's not your fault. There are resources for you, there are people who will help you, there are people who can help you, and that you don't have to stay. It doesn't last forever and things will get better. But with that in mind, that's where I'm going to end things today. Thank you so much for watching today. If you are interested, I've got some new merch and t-shirt designs out featuring some really cool like feminist slogans and stuff like that. One of them is a line from a new poem that I'm working on about how as women are defined by our strengths and our hearts, not arbitrary things like a womb or body parts. And it's meant to empower all women because we are more than just our bodies and what other people say we are, and it's just meant to be something that makes people feel good and is quite empowering, and hopefully it's something that you guys will like as well. So if you want to check them out, my merch store will be linked down in the description below and you can have a look on there. But other than that, please let me know your thoughts on this video. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time and effort so much, and I'll see you again really soon.